and welcome to the next edition of Reclaiming My Mind. I am your host, Jessica Vaughn, also the president of the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Tampa Bay. And today we have our third, technically our second, because our last candidate didn't qualify, but our third municipal mayoral candidate on today. Today we have Mike Suarez. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. I thank you for opening your home and inviting me to do this.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that our listeners are going to get to hear so many of the municipal candidates, because it's hard to get information about local elections. So we really appreciate when people come on. When we start the show, before we kind of launch into your campaign, I always like to get a feel for our candidates' background. So tell me about yourself, where you grew up, what your background is, so people get to know you a little bit more than just your campaign.
Oh, well, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And again, thanks for having me on. I grew up in West Tampa, and that's...
So you're born in Tampa.
I'm born and raised. I'm the third generation Tampanian, or Tampeño, as some folks like to say. And my father was a barber for over 25 years, and he raised four kids. I'm the fourth of four.
You're the baby.
I'm the baby. That's what my mother likes to call me. Correct. And that when you're at 54 years old and your mother still calls you the baby, it's a little bit disturbing, but still. My father really was. He wasn't the best money manager. So, there were times that, our lights were out, our water didn't work. There were, a lot of struggles that we had. And, primarily because of the way my father worked, but also, being a barber, even back then, was not an easy way to raise a family. It was easier then than it is now. And then eventually my mother went into the workforce, and I graduated from I went to public schools my entire career, and graduated from Jefferson High School in 82. I went to the University of South Florida and graduated from there in 86 with a bachelor's in political science, surprise, surprise. And eventually I went back and got my master's degree in public administration. And my idea was, I'm going to be a city manager or county administrator. That was my goal. And during the course of time when you're doing your MPA program, they ask you to do an internship. So I was looking for an internship, and I made a decision. Let me see what government is about, and let's see what the elected government is about. And I volunteered at Bob Graham's office, who was our former governor at that time, and he had been a senator for about a year or so, a U.S. senator. And so while I was there, the person that was our staff assistant, she quit after 3 weeks, and then actually they offered me the job, so I became a staff assistant. I got I remember the minimum wage I was making was, I think, $3.25 an hour.
Wow,
that goes to show you how old I am. And eventually, I stayed there for about a year. Left. I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency in Chicago.
Oh.
My wife graduated from DePaul University. She was up there. We had started dating literally a few months before. I went up to Chicago, started working there, and then they offered me the job to come back down to Tampa to run Bob Graham's office for Central Florida. So I did that for another almost 4 years, and so that's really what started my political career, was doing that. And then afterwards I left and went into the insurance business, and I've been in the insurance industry ever since 1993.
So when you say insurance, what part of the insurance industry?
I'm a salesman. I sell insurance to commercial clients. So, businesses, restaurants, furniture stores, whatever it may be. And
like liability insurance?
Liability, property,
Okay.
all that. In addition, what's great about that, it's a lot like being in politics, which is someone has an issue, you try and bring a solution to it. You work as best you can to meet their needs. And that's really what government service is about. We're trying to meet people's needs.
Sure.
I ran for the legislature in 98 when I was 34 years old. So, really 20 years ago, and I was the Democratic nominee for, at the time was District 57, was in South Tampa. And I lost in a general election. And I didn't get back into elected politics until 2011 when I ran and won. And I've been serving the city of Tampa since then. So
as a city councilman.
As a city councilman, yeah.
So when you said you didn't get back into electoral politics, were you still involved in politics in some way?
Yeah, what I would do is I would either help other candidates, either raise money or help them get elected. At one time, I was the head of the Democratic Party here locally.
You were the chair.
I was the chair in 2007. So I got elected at the end of 2006, and I stayed there until the end of 2007. When 2008 came around, of course, we had Barack Obama run and win. Thankfully, I had already left the leadership of the party, and I actually had an auto accident later that year. They discovered I had cancer in my kidney, and I had to have an operation. Yeah, it was a weird thing, and so I thankfully removal of the kidney, removed the cancer. I never had to go to chemo or anything.
Wow.
And then I stayed in the industry and did some other things, and eventually got back into elected politics.
So in 2009, you said you won your first election.
2011.
2011. You probably said 11. I thought 9.
That's okay.
So in 2011, you won at large, right? You
Correct.
represent the entire city.
Correct.
And now you're finishing your second term.
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about what you feel are some of your biggest accomplishments as a city council member.
Well, when you're a city council member, you always have to find, it's sort of the equation of 3. You need 3 more people in order to agree with you, plus the mayor in order to sign the bill or the ordinance. Some of the things that I have been very proud of, I introduced and got passed an ordinance through our community redevelopment agency. And what that means is that we provide contracts as a board without the mayor specifically. Contracts to redevelop certain parts of the city. Things like the Jeff Phoenix project in the Channelside area. Things like, you'll see some facade grants that are given to buildings, older buildings, let's say in Ybor City.
Facade meaning fix up the outside.
Fix the outside. So they provide dollars for folks that want to fix that up, and it actually beautifies the neighborhood, beautifies the area. We do it in East Tampa. We do it in Drew Park. And we do it in Channelside. And so for me, we passed an ordinance to provide apprentices for those jobs over $100,000. So if you have a contract out there, you need to get 20% of your laborers have to be people that came from certified apprenticeship programs. And it was something that I promoted among the unions. And I said, listen, wouldn't you be interested in doing this? We worked with one of our trade unions to do that, and we got it passed. And that was I thought a very good accomplishment. A couple other things that I've done, and one that I think will be, it'll go a long way to actually beautifying the rest of the city is right now, whenever you're in code enforcement, let's say there's a property that's empty, we cut the grass, the city does, for you. Right. And then we send you a bill. And we hope that you will pay the bill.
Sure.
Sometimes you don't pay the bill. And there are scofflaws, those folks that have not paid. Usually they're bank-owned businesses, or they're owned by a private entity that has not actually, they're not here anymore or whatever. And so what I did is we passed an ordinance so that when you are not paying your bill, in order to mitigate that and let us use the land, give us a lease for a year for free. And, we'll mitigate your fees to us, and let us use that to do a community garden or a community farm, and use the volunteers to come on in, grow the food, and then have nonprofits, let's say Feeding Tampa Bay, Metropolitan Ministries,
right.
Trinity Cafe, whoever, to come on in and actually use fresh food to be able to feed people. And I thought that just got passed last year. We're still working out the kinks. Hopefully, we'll get that done. Hopefully we'll have our first client doing this before I leave office. But if not, when I'm mayor, I'm going to make sure that we try to expand that program. Those are 2 small things that I've done that I think that I'm very proud of, primarily because I think it helps people, and it actually helps the city too. So You always have to try and find partnerships, to me. I think that's the best way of dealing with things.
And speaking of kind of food issues, because we recently did a meeting, when I say we, I mean the Progressive Caucus, about food insecurity. You're on the board of Feeding Tampa Bay, is that correct?
I am, that's correct.
So do you feel like you have a passion for food insecurity, or that's an issue that you feel is close to you? How did you become a board member on there?
It's one of those stories that's really strange. It's circuitous in terms of what happened. Thomas Mance, who's the head of Feeding Tampa Bay, had met me at an event, and he asked me, he said, listen, let's go to lunch. I want to talk to you because he wanted to find out if I'd be interested in joining the board. So while we were talking, I made a comment that was something my father always mentioned. My father was one of 9 boys that grew up in West Tampa in a 3-bedroom house with an outhouse. They didn't have inside plumbing. And he used to make a joke. He said, I always wore long sleeves, even as hot as it is here in Tampa. And I said, why'd you wear long sleeves? He said, well, I'm so skinny, I always wore long sleeves. And Thomas Mance said to me, he goes, your father was probably food insecure. Coming from a big family like that, I never had thought about it that way. Because my father always, made a joke of it. He never said anything.
Right.
But then all these stories that he had told me over the years flooded back to me, and it made sense that he probably wasn't getting enough food.
Right.
And so that made me passionate about it and made me really want to do certain things. And when my father passed away a year and a half ago, instead of flowers, I wanted people to give money to Feeding Tampa Bay, which we did. And I think we raised close to $2,000 among folks that knew my dad and stuff. So that made me feel good because I knew that my father must have been food insecure. So it really does hit home. I never thought of it that way and it's weird the way life works. Sometimes somebody says something and it triggers something inside you.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in the vein of that, right, since we're talking about food insecurity and you're on the board, what we're going to be talking about, obviously, are prioritizing different needs of different neighborhoods. And I know that you and I have kind of talked about that in general, but one of the things that I've been talking, especially to the city candidates about, is food deserts, how a lot of the, marginalized communities or, communities where they're maybe more working class or lower income don't have access to as many food options and specifically nourishing food. So how do you see as mayor or while you were working as city candidate, what do you see as an incentive or a way of making sure that in all neighborhoods, they don't have food deserts and that there's access to the same kind of nutrition holistically for all of the neighborhoods?
This is a problem that we've been dealing with for many, many years. Now, I'm at an age that I remember when I was on the Chamber of Commerce had an initiative. It's called the East Tampa Initiative. I was on that committee with, there's a lot of people that you would recognize, like Diane Hart, who's now a state representative. She was on that. A few other folks that have been involved. And we were trying to draw major, food chains or grocery stores to actually situate in East Tampa. And it was very difficult to get them on board. There are 2 things that become a problem. One is the way that the profit motive works for them. They need bigger pieces of land. They need so many parking spaces. So it makes it harder in a place like East Tampa. And I know you've been there many times. There are not a lot of large parcels of land that you can put a large piece of large grocery store, let's say, when there's so many single-family homes. I mean, you would have to displace a lot of people, and we don't want to do that.
Right.
So then the next step is, how do you find, folks to be able to provide fresh, good food for people that may not have the economic advantages that other folks do in other parts of the city? So there was a young man at USF that had an idea about having, he was creating WIC stores. So those places that were there that you could actually get the WIC type products.
Which are for people who are approved for certain
food, income level.
Right. And they have access to certain food items with vouchers, pretty much.
That's correct. Sort. But in addition to doing that, because those are usually staples, and typically they are filling, but not necessarily fresh.
Right.
And I don't mean because there's milk included in that, but I mean fresh food like vegetables, and and so he said, well, we're going to do that, and then we're also going to provide some other staples that you don't see usually, lettuce, tomatoes, fresh vegetables, whether it's green beans or broccoli or something like that. That kind of healthy alternative is what we need to try and find. We need to find those companies and those businesses that want to do business there and want to provide some type of healthy alternative. As you know, Whole Foods is, got a lot of healthy food, Fresh Market, some other places, but they don't typically situate in areas that don't have high incomes. And I want to try and find a way to come to agreement with them as the mayor. And when you're the mayor, you have that advantage of being able to call a corporate CEO or to call other businesses and say, how do we solve this problem so that you have incentive to do it? And what I mean is that people do things for money a lot of times.
Sure.
Even though they may want to do it in their heart. You still have to get a way to find that connective tissue that makes them want to do it. To me, I'm always trying to find solutions to solve those kind of problems. That is not going to be an easy thing to do. It really won't be. And we can only do so much from the city side, but we need more partners that are willing to do it. And there are people out there that are willing to kind of look at it. I'd like to get a consortium of people that may have some dollars and say, listen, we'd like to have these small grocery stores. We used to have them all over our neighborhoods. I know in my neighborhood, there was at least 3 small grocery stores. And my grandmother and my grandfather, they used to own one right next to where Ray Park is in West Tampa, called the Wagon Wheel, and that's why everybody in my family, all through West Tampa, if you ask about us and if you say, you're a carreton, which is a cart, a push cart, that's what we used to call the Wagon Wheel.
Oh.
So that's why, we're known for that. And so that's another reason why I'm passionate about that.
So do you think as mayor, that would be a priority, definitely on your priority list?
It definitely would be a priority for us to try and provide the kind of services we need in East Tampa, especially that, banks and actually pharmacies. We really don't have many there.
So we're talking about some of your successes as a city council member, but what would you say were some of the larger challenges that you faced as a member of city council? Well,
a challenge that we have not actually been able to get to and actually complete, and all of us on council probably feel this way, is we have a very chronic homeless issue in the city of Tampa. Now, homelessness has, 3 real issues in there. There are, mental health issues a lot of times. Mental health issues a lot of times lead to drug and alcohol issues. And then there are folks, those are the most chronic folks that are homeless. And then the third thing, and I think most importantly, there are people that are living on the streets because they don't have the money to go somewhere else, and they don't have the other 2 problems that we just mentioned. We need to find ways to provide the kind of places to live where people feel comfortable. The county is the main agency to provide housing for people. We get some pass-through dollars from the federal government, very little, and we've got actually our budget on that has shrunk significantly since I first took office. And what you'll find is that they have a concept called Housing First, which is how do we get units in different places and allow folks to be able to live there, whether they need counseling for their drug problem, alcohol problem, mental health problem, and have a place that they can be independent too. And we have several of these across the city and in the county, and people won't believe this, but we do have places all over the city, including in South Tampa, that provide these type of services, but we don't have enough of them.
And how do people find out about them?
Typically, they are going through the county because the social services are all handled through the county. And for me, as mayor, I remember we had a meeting, myself, the current mayor, and a consultant from HUD. We talked about it, and
which is a housing
and urban development. Yes, correct. He says, really, the only thing when you're not a city like Chicago, where you control the jails, you control the police, you control all the social services, the only thing we can do here in Tampa is really use it as a bully pulpit to talk about this issue. And I try and talk about things in a positive way so that we can solve some of these problems. It is one of the toughest problems for any mayor in any city across America.
Yeah.
It's doubly more difficult here because we don't have control of all those other mechanisms that you can kind of put forward to help solve that problem.
Well, plus we have a climate that is easier for people to survive in.
Yes.
What do you think about, have you heard about the concept of, as opposed to homeless, referring to that population as houseless?
Yes.
Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
How do you think that there's a difference in those terms?
It can be. I don't go into, because obviously homelessness means something different than other folks. Houseless can mean that, that third group I was talking about, which is someone that's economically not able to afford to live somewhere. And I think you made a very good point, which is that probably is because there are folks that will not go into either a group setting or even an individual setting because of their severe issues with either mental health or emotional health or drug and alcohol. So those are very tough issues for us.
So you've been 2 terms city council. Now you're jumping into a mayoral race. Why are you propelled? What draws you towards wanting to be the mayor of Tampa?
Well, first, I love to serve. I've enjoyed the time that I've been on council. Someone told me one time, said, you seem to smile all the time when you're on council. And I said, the reason I smile is because I really love what I do. I love trying to help people and trying to figure out all these items that we have in front of us. How do we solve some of these problems and really take some real hard look at it, even with the limited power that you have from city council? When you're the mayor, you have a little bit more power to kind of control things and how the direction that the city's going to go. I want to see us be not only serving, the economic climate of the city, which is very important, but also serving the individual neighborhoods that, to me, make up the real backbone of the city of Tampa. And it doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in. We're in a neighborhood that was not a neighborhood when I was growing up, that was not part of the city of Tampa. And you see other places across the city that have gone through different waves where they've been incredibly strong neighborhoods and now they're weaker because of economic issues or because the city has neglected to take care of them.
Or because they drove an interstate through them.
That's another reason why. Yeah. And so when you look at these type of issues, a mayor can actually handle how we look as a city. And to me, that's incredibly important. I have a passion for it. And for me, I really believe that this election, because, we're going to be starting the second quarter of the 21st century. And when you think about it that way, it's like, wow, we're almost finished with the first quarter. I'd like for us to be able to go in the next 4 and then hopefully 8 years after I'm mayor to strengthen those bonds that we have between the city government and the neighborhoods specifically.
So what would you say differentiates you from the other candidates in the race?
I will say this. And this is, I want to say it so that I'm not trying to take shots at anyone, but I tend to talk about people as opposed to, grandiose ideas that don't fit into people's lives. So having served on HART, which is our bus system, for the last 7.5 years, I see the challenges that people have just to be able to get from their home to their job. And when I tell people, look, this is not about, and there's a phrase that they call it, guys with ties. There seems to be a tendency to talk about how do we get people to work downtown. It isn't just about downtown. How do we get people to work from East Tampa to West Tampa? How do we get people to work from West Tampa up to USF? There is, and I know we're very close to USF here. There was, I talked to one of the banquet managers at University of South Florida, and she said that HART service had been diminished, and a lot of folks that work at USF who are in different parts of the city and different parts of the county could not get there for their jobs.
Sure.
It was a big issue, and they couldn't even provide the transportation necessary to go from the university area, stop that we have, the station, to USF, because USF stopped providing that kind of service for their employees. And that to me was unconscionable. We were trying to work with them to try and help them out.
So what's the solution to that?
Which part of it? You mean trying to get a more
Connecting
extensive...
our neighborhoods and transportation, our transportation crisis in general. What are your solutions?
It is always about providing more transportation options. And right now we have very few. You have a vehicle. You can try and take mass transit, but we don't have the connections because we don't have the number of buses. All for transportation, as you know, as a referendum passed. That will give us the options that I think we're going to have. That we're going to need, With those dollars, we'll be able to provide better sidewalks in different areas. We'll be able to, which is the first mode of transportation. Walking, and if you're ambulatory, that's the first mode. The second thing is that it'll be able to provide more buses right now, not just about what we're going to do in the future. We can provide more buses now and reduce the frequency from where we're at in certain areas, 30 minutes to an hour. We can reduce that from that hour to 30 minutes and that 30 minutes to 15 minutes. If I have to wait for a bus for 15 minutes and be able to get to my job in a timely fashion, it's better for me. Now I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm going to get fired. I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm going to lose my house because I can't find another job. I don't have to worry about where I have to move in order to get closer to another job. Those kind of real world issues are more important to me than whether or not we call it a train, a autonomous vehicle, a bus. Let's talk about what real people need and the people that live in these diverse neighborhoods, because right now we're not doing that.
Do you think that we haven't been doing that for lack of funding or lack of leadership?
I think it's a little bit of both. And let me explain myself. The money part of it at heart is extremely true. I mean, we have a budget that's $80 million, which is a very small bus system in a county this size. But worse, that the way that the bus system is set up, we have 5 county commissioners that serve on it. We have 2 people that are selected by the governor to go on there. And at the beginning of my service on there in 2011, there was a lot of animosity to trying to find other ways of funding more bus service and more service in general, and being able to go out to the federal government and try and help us get that. And that meant we didn't have the kind of leadership necessary. I don't think that this current administration has made transportation a keystone to how you build a city. That's extremely important. And the mayor is the one person in the entire political spectrum here in the Bay Area that has that kind of bully pulpit. You can go, if I announce as mayor that I'm going to open an envelope, I can guarantee you there's going to be 3 cameras there that are going to talk to me. You can use that to your advantage in order to actually solve some of these problems. And I don't think that we've had that currently.
Do you think, like a lot of other candidates, that using the existing rail tracks, is it CRX tracks? CSX is a viable option? Is that something that you're a proponent of?
No, I'm not. And there's 2 reasons why. It doesn't go to where people actually live, first of all. And the second reason is that it's going to be extremely expensive for us to buy that buy the right of way from CSX, where we're actually just leasing it from them. They're not going to sell us track. We're going to let them, they're going to say, here, give us for $10 million a mile. We'll let you have it. And then now we still get to use it at a certain time. So it's a disruption. There's better ways that we can provide transportation without the CSX tracks line. I know that I'm different than a couple of my opponents that have suggested that. That's an idea that was started back in the 90s. Probably back in the 90s, it might have made more sense. Right now, I don't think it does.
How about expanding the trolley that runs into Ybor into Seminole Heights? Is that something you think would be a good idea?
We are going to, when I'm the mayor, within 100 days, we're going to start that construction. Right now, we are studying it to go up to Tampa Heights. That's the first leg that we need to go through. So I'm hoping that in my first term, we will, if not complete the leg that goes up to Tampa Heights, but hopefully running by the time the end of my first term. To go all the way up to Seminole Heights, I don't know. We'll have to deal with Florida Department of Transportation. Florida Avenue is owned by FDOT, and I think you touched on this a little bit earlier in the broadcast that FDOT sometimes can be very difficult to deal with, and try to get them to get on your side to build the city as opposed to just building a road. Mm-hmm. Roads are great, but you have to build the city around it too.
So are you a proponent of anything other than buses and cars? We're talking about the trolley, but sure. In general, when we're talking about solutions, if not using the tracks, do you think that light rail is an option? Or tell me a little bit more about, I know you said it depends on the individual neighborhood, right? Mm-hmm. And the solutions that's right for that.
Absolutely.
But are there more solutions that other than cars and buses that you see in your plan for transportation?
Absolutely. I think that we need to look at how we actually expand our transportation network. And that could mean that we create 20 miles of rail, or maybe we do 10. It really depends on where people's needs are. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what you have to look at. Because, you can put a map out and you can say, we want tracks, all these places. You remember, and I think you know this about as well as anyone, there's displacement and there's disruption, and you have to make sure that you're careful about it. Minneapolis, as an example, had an extension of, I think it was the Gold Line. They call it the Gold Line, that was going from St. Paul to Minneapolis. And they had a nonprofit group put together by business, community foundations, and the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul to put money into it to provide affordable workforce housing along the line. So if you're, and they even provided loans to businesses that are going to be disrupted because of the construction that was going on. Minneapolis has a very successful transit system. I would like for us to collaborate in that way to actually solve problems of housing in relation to transportation, not just putting a track out there or a bus line because we can.
Right.
It's about solving those other issues too.
So I was looking over your website, and I'm just going to be honest, I'm surprised at a lot of the municipal candidates. Their website, it's harder for me to get a feel for their platform, but I did see that you have a Bill of Rights.
Yeah, that's right.
that I've printed out.
Terrific.
So do you feel like that's kind of the pillars or platform of your campaign, or are there some pillars and platforms specifically that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, no, the Neighborhood Bill of Rights, which you found on the website, what we thought about, and here's why. Unlike other candidates, I've been to every one of the neighborhoods that we identify as neighborhoods in the city of Tampa.
How many are there, would you say?
There are 70 plus. Okay. It's right around that area because it depends, because we're always adding new neighborhoods all the time.
Sure.
But when you've gone to either festivals, homeowners associations, crime watch meetings, and what I've done over my 7.5 years, I've not only gone to the big meetings where there are lots of neighbors, but I've met with groups of neighborhood association presidents that are dealing with these issues from their neighbors. So, we would have coffees with 3 or 4 of them at different places. So if you're Seminole Heights or South Seminole Heights or, Tampa Heights all together, we'd all sit down, have coffee, talk about different issues. And what I found is that they all have 4 issues that they typically deal with. That's what the Bill of Rights is made up of, which is public safety. I want to make sure that the police and fire show up when they're supposed to show up. If I have a crime in my neighborhood or my house, I want to make sure when I call 911 they respond in a timely fashion. If there's a fire, the same thing with with our Tampa Fire Rescue.
Right.
When you're looking at how we treat people from the community policing side of it, which is I'm a big believer in. I think we should have police that are more involved in communities so that communities feel comfortable with the police so that when crimes are committed, they feel like police are going to be there for them and not respond against them. And I think that that's a big issue.
Absolutely.
And to be honest with you, it protects not only the citizens, but it protects the police too. And I think it makes it better for them.
Yeah.
The second tenet of it, as you see, is transportation, some of the things we talked about. But, really sidewalks are incredibly important for that. We need to make sure that when we go out, we're going to have a sidewalk selection survey to all these neighborhoods. Where's the best places for sidewalks? Some places they'll say, well, we're going to put just along here. Oh, wait a minute. How about some of these cross streets? Where do we go? Where do people actually travel? I want people to understand that we're there to serve them, not to tell them. And there's a little bit of a difference there.
Sure.
And then the third thing is improving our services. I mean, if you are in certain parts of the city, there are lots of potholes. There are lots of streets that need to be graded. And listen, when we say we're going to do something, we should do it. We should fill a hole. When we say there's a pothole there. And then the last thing, which is integrity in government, and that means it's pretty holistic. When you make a commitment and you say you're going to do something, do it. If you can't do it for some reason, whether it's money or because it's time or because we have some other snafu, make sure you tell the public that. You have to be straightforward with people that you serve. If you can't be honest with someone when you're looking at them face to face, or when you're talking about it in a television interview or even in a neighborhood association meeting, then really you shouldn't be in public service. The most important thing we should do is communicate to people what we do. And if we can't do that, and if you're not willing to do that, you shouldn't serve.
Would you say that's the same thing as transparency?
That's exactly the same thing as transparency. I mean, and what I want to do is I want to put online our budget to make sure that when we actually approve projects, we see as it's being built, how much money we're using. I want people to know that we're doing the things we say we're going to do with their money.
So now I'm going to kind of turn over to a few things. I like to touch on just some issues that are important to me.
Sure.
Sometimes, the mayor might barely touch on them, and sometimes it might be something that you have more of an active role on.
Sure.
But I did want to touch on a couple listener questions.
Okay.
Right now, it seems like there's a very strong grassroots movement that kind of sprang up against the Tampa Bay's Rays Stadium going in Ybor. And it seemed like that was, dead, that the owner decided that wasn't even an option.
Right.
But then there's still some talk of county commission having some further meetings about that.
Sure.
And I know that's at the county level, but just in general, is that something that you were supportive of, or do you understand, or do you see that might be a bad idea for that neighborhood? Tell me a little bit about your thoughts regarding that issue.
Someone asked me the other day whether or not I thought going into Ybor City was a good idea. And I said, I didn't like the site itself for a lot of different reasons.
Right.
But like any business, they have the option of being able to ask us for community redevelopment dollars if they're in that area. I mean, Jeff Finnick's project, which was a relatively empty place. There weren't a lot of folks living. I don't think there were anybody living there for the most part. They use those dollars. They put in water and sewer lines and sidewalks, and we reimburse them. And that comes from the community redevelopment fund. It can only be spent there. It can't be spent anywhere else in the city. So, we're not doing anything, out of the ordinary there. I don't have a problem with the Rays if they decide to come to Tampa to ask us to provide those kind of things, because we're already doing it for other businesses and other companies and other individuals across the city. I don't want to put any dollars that come out of general revenue at all towards a stadium, towards anything to deal with that. They have to come up with dollars in order to kind of invest in here. And to me, they were offered a fairly good deal from the county, and they made a decision not to follow up on it. That's up to them.
Right.
I have a feeling that they're going to try and come back to Tampa, but it's going to be a lot different the second time around.
And then I have another listener question,
Sure.
which I think it's more of a plant question, but
okay, go ahead.
I'm going to go ahead and honor it. No, I think it's to set you up to say something good.
Okay. Okay.
But they wanted to know what you think about some of the mayoral candidates that have conveniently changed their party affiliation recently.
Well, I will say this. I am a lifelong Democrat. I have always been a Democrat, and I hopefully will die a Democrat, primarily because I've always, and we were talking about my father earlier today. He was a very strong Democrat. He told me, this is hilarious, coming from a guy with the kind of background that he had. He said that in 2016, when Donald Trump was elected, it was the worst day of his life. I said, Dad, you've been through a lot of bad days.
Right.
Okay. How is this the worst day of your life? He was so disgusted. And there's people in this race that voted for Donald Trump. And again, that's their right. They can vote for whoever they want.
Sure.
I don't know how anyone going through this past campaign in 2016, and especially now after the last 2 years, could have voted for Donald Trump. That's a big issue for me. The other thing is that people that have changed, their stripes only in the last 4 years, 5 years, I don't know what they were looking at to make them be a Republican at that time. I can understand being a Republican when you were raised that way and certain things. But you get to a point where you grow up, you understand politics a little bit more. You should kind of understand that there are real issues that we deal with. And sometimes we agree with each other and sometimes we don't. And I think that we have to make sure that people understand that, let me say this, I don't care if somebody's a Republican or a Democrat. What I care about is what they're going to do for us as a community. I want people who want to be involved in our community. And if they're not going to do that, then I don't think they should be serving the public.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now I'm going to talk about some of the issues that I just generally talk with our candidates about. One, surprisingly enough, I haven't had to ask the last two candidates about this, but generally I find I do have to ask city or even county commission candidates about public education. As a certified teacher, I'm very concerned about the attack on public education and privatization. And the other two candidates had that kind of at the forefront of their platform, even though we have a school board and there's the state legislation.
Right.
So really the mayor doesn't have a huge influence on public education. But for me, it's important to know where candidates stand on that in general. So give me some of your thoughts on public education, charter schools, and the trend to kind of privatize education.
Well, I will tell you, let me answer that question in relation to being the mayor. And I think that the mayor has a role, even if it's not an operational role for education. And what I'd like for us to do, and my next door neighbor was telling me about what she does. Her daughter goes to Blake High School, which is not far from where I live. And her and another woman that all our kids went to school together and stuff, they try and help people that don't have an idea of what they want to do next. And that is a wide range and a very diverse group of kids that are going to Blake, very diverse. We should, as a city, work with the school board to find ways to provide those kind of options, whether it is kids that want to go into, let's say, the trades, find apprenticeship programs so that they can learn to do something that's outside of a regular education,
Sure.
a regular traditional education. Not everyone wants to go to college.
Sure.
Not everyone is prepared to go to college, and not everyone is suited for college. I think we all know that.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean they're not productive people, and they're not going to be productive in our society.
Right.
And we need to find those small ways in which we can help folks understand, here are some options for you. And unfortunately, I think that I know in my life, I was lucky enough to have a father and a mother and a support system that was able to give me those options and tell me those options.
Sure.
Some folks don't have that, and we want to make sure that they do. I think that as the mayor of Tampa, we should provide those kind of ideas and services to those students that are coming out. It makes a better city. It makes us more economically viable, and it helps us thrive. And more importantly, it makes a better county and a better, neighborhoods, because people are more productive. They feel happier. They feel happier in what they do. Now, one of the things that I'd like to see how we do it is create some apprenticeship programs within the city of Tampa. Right now, we have a workforce in the city that is starting to age out. And there are jobs that do not require college educations, but they do require some training, some certification from the state. Like a small example, a water treatment plant operator. Okay, now that is a state certified position. You can take classes to do that. You can become certified, and you can run a water treatment plant. I would like us to find those folks that go to school in our Hillsborough County schools in the city to say, here's some options. Let's do an apprenticeship program. We have scientists that work for the city of Tampa that test the quality of the water.
Sure. Okay.
We have people that work at wastewater treatment plants, and they're technical jobs. They are important jobs. They are things that can be done without having a college education. That's what I'd like to see us do in the city of Tampa.
And I love that answer.
Yeah.
But it doesn't address my question.
I know it doesn't.
Charter schools and public schools.
Yeah. The thing about charter schools, and, I didn't want to get too deep into educational policy, but we know that the coffers of public schools have been raided by corporate charter schools. There are some charter schools that help kids that have individual needs that are fine. I don't have a problem with charter schools that are doing that, Pepin or other places. But man, when they come up with these charter schools that are really sucking all the dollars out of the public school system, it disturbs me. My children, except for my oldest son, all of them have gone completely through public school. And, we want parents to have options to know that whatever their kids needs, they should be able to do it. Not every public school can do that based on where they're located and also some of the programs they have. But the charter schools shouldn't be replacing our public schools. That drives me nuts. And I know because I've had to deal with this when I talk to people who say, oh, I'm going to send my kid to this school. And I said, why are you going to send them there when there's a public school literally down the street from you that provides a better, if as good as not or not better, education for the things that you say that are not provided in the public school. I just don't get that.
Right.
And I don't know if I answered it at that time, but
No, you did. You came much closer. I appreciate it.
You're no problem.
How about minimum wage? Obviously we don't control that, but Levine, passed $15 an hour in Miami, even though he wasn't able to necessarily honor it. He did show commitment towards the fight for 15. What are your thoughts regarding minimum wage?
I think we should raise it across the state for sure. That they just raised it.
New Jersey, I believe.
Well, no, on January 1st, we got an automatic increase, which was exactly what Philip Levine was arguing about, which is we haven't used the constitutional amendment was passed in order to increase the minimum wage. I believe that the legislature should get out of our way as a city, and if we want to raise the minimum wage, we should be able to. What I'd like to see is cities across the state bind together and all of us pass the minimum wage at the same time and let the legislature make a decision that they're going to preempt all of us for that. Because if they did that, because it's one thing to have a city of 70,000 people in Miami Beach that are probably making more money than minimum wage already and passing it versus a city like Jacksonville. Orlando or Tampa, Miami, larger cities that actually have a diverse workforce that actually are affected by the minimum wage not being high enough because it affects the entire economy within the city.
Do you think that $15 should be the starting point?
I don't know. And here's why. I don't know where we're at in terms of a minimum wage and how high it has to be. I like $15 because it's something that we can talk about. We can have a conversation about. I just don't know if $15 is going to be the right number, the wrong number. I just like for us to get past where we're at now. I mean, because I think the wage increase that just happened, I think we're at $10.37 or something like that. It's not a whole hell of a lot of money. Excuse my language, but
How do you think we decide that?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, economists have different viewpoints on how that works. I know that when we started talking about minimum wage years ago, we used to have fairly regular increments through the federal government would raise it, which I think is the smartest way to do it. I think that we should all be on an even playing field across the country, period. But I know that that's not going to happen in this day and age.
As of today, New Jersey, I think I read they just raised it to $15.
That's correct.
I know Seattle did.
Well, and Seattle has the advantage of a legislature that would allow them to go ahead and raise it. That's one of the great things about Seattle. So.
One of the great things.
Yeah, one of the great things.
So I don't know if it's made public yet, so I'm not going to say any names, but I saw that one of the mayoral candidates is going to take a stance on adult use marijuana and whether or not they're a proponent or opponent of that. Is that something that you would say that you have a stance on?
Are you talking about decriminalization, or what exactly?
Legalizing recreational marijuana, but advocates want to be very clear that you call it adult use as opposed to recreational.
Right. I haven't thought about it in that sense. I mean, obviously, we passed an ordinance on city council that decriminalized small amounts of marijuana use. And my guess would be adult use, and we were allowed to do that under the state legislature. I think that we may be going in a certain direction. Obviously, Governor DeSantis has said smokable marijuana should be allowed for medicinal purposes, which I think is a smart idea. I'm not sure where we're going to be with the recreational side. I'd love to find out what the legislature is going to do to try and preempt us. We're starting to get preempted on just community gardens, for God's sakes. I mean, who knows what they're going to do with this.
Sure.
But I haven't thought that deeply about it because we've been fighting this other fight for so long. So I haven't really thought about making a decriminalization. And I guess we couldn't do it anyway because all crime statutes come from the state legislature. So you can't decriminalize it and you can't control whether or not they get fined or anything else because that's all state statute.
I think it'd be similar in the way where you can't control $15 an hour, but if enough leaders of different cities and states across the counties and cities come out across the state and the leaders say, we think that this state could benefit and that, adults should have the choice to recreationally, adult use marijuana, that it should, hopefully make a change for those advocates.
Well, there's no doubt that the drug laws have got to be changed after so many years of putting people away for very minor infractions.
Right.
We need to figure out how we can do that.
So I saw that you today on your Facebook page that you were endorsed by some unions, and
Correct.
that's usually one of my questions. And I know that you'd been talking about some work with unions. So I'm assuming just based on our conversation that you're very pro-union and workers' rights.
Yes.
So that's one of the issues that we always talk about. Also, we had Taranchuk on, who's the environmentalist. And I think that one of the things that I'm concerned about is, especially with Tampa, we are so close to so many beautiful natural resources. It's one of the reasons we stay here. And there are so many people who are keen to develop that.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your views as far as the environment as mayor, versus development and protecting our environment here.
I voted against a project yesterday at council because they were going to remove quite a few of the trees that were on there. I mean, they were only going to retain, I think, 13% of the trees, so they wanted to have a waiver on that. I voted against it. I think that a couple of things that have happened while I've been on council. We have tried to strengthen our tree canopy, which of course is a natural barrier for us to provide oxygen to us. Also helps provide for flood control. It really sucks up the water, and that helps us for resiliency when it comes to stormwater surge, things like that. I really believe that we need to do more to reduce our carbon footprint. One of the ways that I'd like to do this is to have less fleet vehicles, that we own, and that we could, use Zipcar as an example to rent for certain vehicle trips. So let's say, for an example, we have 100, fleet vehicles. Instead of having 100 fleet vehicles that are running on regular gasoline, let's reduce that and say we'll rent, up to 25 of them on a per needed basis that are electric vehicles for short trips. It's harder when you talk about police cruisers and fire engines because they need that kind of diesel power to power them. But I think that we can really change the nature of how we do things. I also think that with TECO especially, we don't have a lot of control over what they do because of the Public Service Commission, and that's a state agency. But we can negotiate with them when they have their new franchise agreement, which will be coming up in about, I think, a year and a half. As mayor, we can say, listen, how can we reduce the amount of electricity that we use that comes out of a coal burning plant to make Tampa and the Tampa Bay area a cleaner place? There are incentives, I think, that we can come up with that's going to do that. And then I think we need to talk more about it. We haven't talked about it that much from this particular administration. They've done some good work, no doubt about it, but I think we need to do more.
Do you mean national, statewide?
No, I'm talking about this, our current mayor. Our current mayor and his administration.
Mayor.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there's some opportunities that we can get better at it. We've done some good things, but there's always room to improve.
Have you heard about the Ready for 100% program?
Is this through the Sierra Club? I
don't think it's through the Sierra Club. I think it's national, but I think the Sierra Club is a proponent of it.
Okay, so you're 100% renewable energy sources. Yes, I have seen that, and I think the Sierra Club's version of it is like maybe a 2045 plan, something like that. I've met with them, talked to them, and I've told them I'm a proponent of reducing our carbon footprint and finding ways that the city can do it individually without getting involved with what the state is keeping us from doing. So, some of those things that I just mentioned, there's lots of other things we can do. We can improve the way that we, right now in terms of how we have rooftop gardens, things like that to absorb some water. I actually had, we had a stormwater assessment fee that we passed a couple years ago, and there's some mitigation credits that are allowed for commercial properties. So what I want commercial properties to do, and to reduce their tax, if they said, look, instead of us having a huge concrete lot, let's give an example. Let's say a car lot. Okay. So there's lots of concrete. Okay. There are porous asphalts that are used now. And you can look at this on Google and look up porous asphalt. It pours right through and it goes into the gets seeped into the land. And we could actually allow them to get a discounted credit, which I worked on diligently with the administration in order to reduce it. In addition, I was working with SwiftMud so that we could have a app so that as a builder, you can go look at it, or as a home, not a homeowner, but a property owner, you could look at it and say, here are some things I can do to reduce my runoff, which of course then causes more problems downstream. Here's how we can reduce runoff by using these type of materials that then will reduce my tax because now I'm not having so much runoff. That's because it's based on the amount of non-porous materials that you have on your property. That's how we get taxed on it.
Sure.
And so I was saying, look, let's use that as a carrot as opposed to a stick.
Right.
And I think that we'll be able to get more folks involved in it. And I did an analysis on one particular car lot in Tampa, and it would have saved them if they went ahead and did what I asked them to do. The initial investment would have been $150,000 or somewhere in that neighborhood. It would have saved them over a 30-year period something like $1 million. To me, investment is much more important when you have a savings and you're protecting the environment.
Sure. You're taking the holistic approach.
I'm trying to.
How about a sanctuary city? Is that something you'd be a proponent of if it was an option?
Sanctuary cities are really, if you look at where sanctuary cities are created, there are cities that have control over their jails. The sanctuary city issue has to do with, and this is the start of it. One was what ICE would do in terms of charging the city or not paying back a city to hold someone. To me, I think it's unconscionable for us to make our police officers go out and find someone that might have a traffic violation and then discover that they might be an undocumented person and say, all right, we're going to be charged for it, but we're not going to get repaid. That's a tax, if I want to be a tax and save guy, say, well, why would I do that? The sheriff really has been is really the key here, as opposed to it being a city. Actually, if you know that the sheriff of Pinellas County was one of the leaders of trying to reduce that, he doesn't do everything right, but he does. He did come up with that, and then they changed their tune probably about 6 months ago. They worked on it. They had said, no, we believe that we're not getting paid for this. We're not going to hold folks without making sure that, and then they changed the tune. And unfortunately, that's where the nexus of it. Sanctuary cities for us is only a phrase. It doesn't mean anything here.
Because we don't have the control of the
We have no control over it. Yeah, it makes it a little bit of a difficult talking point. So,
how about Medicare for all? Is that something that you see as a focus?
You see I'm smiling. I'm smiling because I wish that the Barack Obama administration had called it Medicare for all. I think that we would have been much more successful in not had the kind of acrimony that we ended up having, in 2010 and 2012, and I really believe that people understand Medicare for all. And if there was a National Public Radio report that I saw, and they were in Kentucky, and Kentucky has one of the most successful ones. When I think it was Governor Beshear was there, it was called Kentucky Blue. They talked to a guy that was there, and he says, how do you get your health care? And he goes, I go to Kentucky Blue. And he goes, well, that's what a lot of people call Obamacare in other places. He goes, no, it's not. It's Kentucky Blue. And it's sometimes the way you call things has a bigger effect than what it actually does.
But do you think that offering everyone and bypassing, especially from somebody in the insurance company, maybe the insurance companies who regulate the market price and come up with all of the pre-existing conditions, that allowing, everyone, a state option by bypassing the insurance companies and offering Medicare for all like people have when they're 65 or older is the path towards where we should be going as a country? Oh,
absolutely. And one of the things, the dangers that happened with the creation of the Affordable Care Act is that they allowed a option for states to have exchanges.
Right.
Once they allowed the option, and then Republican-controlled states said, we're not going to do that option, that really destroyed it as a national program. And that's unfortunate, because the state of Florida, as you know, almost every year was number one in terms of sign up for the Affordable Care Act. And we, as a city, and this is a plug for the current mayor, Bob Buckhorn, we opened up all of our parks in order for people to come and set up and be able to have those navigators go in and have people come and sign up for the Affordable Care Act. I think that was a great thing for him to have done. I would have continued to do it if we still had the kind of dollars necessary so we could pay navigators to do it. Who knows what's going to happen in the next few years to the Affordable Care Act? Yeah.
Who knows? What about LGBTA rights? Would you say you're a strong advocate to the LGBTA community?
Absolutely. So I'll tell you what, we've always, ever since I got elected, one of the first things that we did was we had, and now it's kind of a quaint thing to talk about now, which is civil unions. We passed an ordinance to allow civil unions, and I think it must have been 6 months later, the Supreme Court made the decision, and gay marriage it was offered across the country.
Right.
So whatever we did then was like, yeah, that's nice that you did a civil union.
Right.
So.
How about gun reform?
Which part of it?
What are your thoughts of it in general? Is it something that we need to address?
Absolutely. I think that, and here's the thing, I don't own a weapon. I've never owned a weapon, but I don't have a problem someone owning a weapon. Okay, let's put that out there, because there's a lot of people that I know that share a lot of my viewpoint. They like having a gun. They like to shoot on a range somewhere. And I said, okay, you like it, that's fine with me. But they're responsible gun owners. And what we have done politically, or not we, but what the NRA has done politically, is identify even those people that want to have some type of control over the dissemination of guns across the country, and made them into some kind of, they're a part of the NRA. I know a lot of folks that are, there's one guy in particular I know, he has probably a collection of about 15 guns. Like I said, I don't own a gun, but he likes guns. He is probably as, progressive of a person as I've ever met, but he does like his gun. But he doesn't believe in any of the NRA stuff. And I don't know how we get out of this kind of rut that we have, and we don't, figure out how do we get rid of things like assault weapons. I mean, there was a Republican president that supported an assault weapon ban at one time. Now we can't even get Republicans to say that assault weapons are bad.
Was that after the Reagan attempt?
No, Reagan had attempted, but it was really George H.W. Bush that did it, and the legislation, was passed in order to continue that, and then it went by the wayside. Those days when people would recognize that having those type of weapons, high, capacity,
assault rifles.
Yes, exactly. I'm sorry, but my mind went blank there. Why is that a legitimate use? You can go and buy a 50 caliber machine gun, and a 50 caliber machine gun, if you really want to know, you can pretty much tear down a tree with a 50 caliber machine gun. That, all you have to do is get, permission from the federal government. You can buy that thing, and you can put it on the back of a truck or whatever.
Sure.
And you could do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Now, I don't get that, but, I really believe that we have not gotten past, I think that Moms Demand Action, some of these other groups that have popped up,
Moms Demand Action,
have been great, and I think that hopefully we will continue to see progression towards eliminating some of these weapons.
Well, I do know you have a very passionate Mom Demand Action on your staff.
I've heard that.
And then finally, my last question, is tell me a little bit about your viewpoints on racial justice. Now, when you're talking about communities being safer, I like how you clarify that you're talking about also making sure that there's community policing, and that so that as communities feel safer, they also build a relationship with the police, and they feel safe because they don't feel that the police are a threat to them, and that it's valuable for both members, both the police officers and the community members, which I think as well.
Right.
I think that personally comes down to also not just community policing, but training.
Yeah.
And reevaluating our training systems and how we train police officers in general. But I mean, it just touches basically a small amount of racial justice. And both of our last mayoral candidates were rolling out some sort of piece. Well, Vaughn, his whole platform was racial justice.
Sure.
And then Taranchuk is rolling out some sort of piece where he wants to have a diversity advisor on his staff. So tell me in general, since, especially now when you look at the history just in general of so many harmful policies that have come from first, enslavement of African Americans and then Jim Crow. And then we see this revision of hatred and racism. What is your commitment and how do you see as mayor leading us towards racial justice?
I thought about this the other day, and I mentioned that I had gone to public schools my entire career. And, those folks that did not grow up here in Tampa, I'm actually the first class at 54 years old, the first class to go through a completely desegregated school system. Now, you got to sink that in a little bit. That means that when I was, 5 or 6 years old and I started in the kindergarten, I was in a completely desegregated system, which was a new thing at that time. 1970, 71, 72, when they were first doing it, that was my first years in school. And it taught me a lot. It taught me, the school I graduated from was essentially 1/3 African American, 1/3 Hispanic, 1/3, Caucasian, white.
No Asians in there?
Huh?
No Asians in there?
There's a few Asians. And actually, you know what? I will tell you this. There's a guy that lived down the street from me, whose name was Eladio Lee. And his grandfather was a Chinese, he had been a Chinese immigrant to Cuba and then became a Cuban immigrant after the Castro took over power and then settled here in Tampa and lived to be about 100 and something years old.
Wow.
So yes, there are Asians that are a part of it, but I guess they would call it Sino-Cuban or I don't know. I'm not sure of the phrasing. But one of the great things about being in a diverse environment from the time that you're little is that you don't see those kind of racial divides that other people see. And I think that your child, my children, have gotten the advantage of being able to go through that kind of diverse group of folks. And I mean, even my children, my 17-year-old and my 20-year-old went through schools where I had never met anyone that was from India. I had never went to school with somebody from India, and now most of his friends and people that they knew were from India, or they were from Pakistan, or they were, from China. And it's an interesting concept now that we do that. The things that we do as mayor is this. The training issue that you mentioned is incredibly important. We had talked about, and the Mayor Buckhorn had, when he was running, he had said that he would hire someone to specifically look at these type of issues. And I've actually said that I would do that also. But this time fulfill it. The mayor did not fulfill his promise when he had said that. I think that what's important about it is that everybody that I've ever known who has been mayor has always had someone like that who was an outreach to the African American community specifically, and that we're a senior level position. And that means that it's not just somebody who's talking to people, but somebody can solve problems and be able to be at the highest level of city government. That's what I have committed to, and that's what I'm going to do when I become mayor.
How about many of those?
We could do that. I mean, right now we have very few neighborhood neighborhood liaison. We have one person in our neighborhood empowerment department. One. We just have 6 people in there, and 6 probably isn't enough. So we do have to beef that up, and that's something that. Would you say that's
going to be a priority?
Absolutely, and it goes back to the Neighborhood Bill of Rights. If you're going to serve neighborhoods, you need to have people out in the neighborhoods.
Right.
And the more you know about those neighborhoods, the more you'll be able to solve problems. The more you'll be able to solve problems, the better people are going to feel about their own neighborhood. It's a full circle.
Awesome. Well, that is the string of issues I want to talk. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you feel like is part of your campaign or part of this race that you want to talk about that I haven't given you an opportunity to talk about that you want to share with our listeners?
Well, you've gone through a lot, believe me. I've enjoyed it. I'll tell you what, I don't get a chance to talk a lot of the issues that you were following and asked me about because, when you're in city government, you do get into sort of not a myopia, but you get into, I got to solve this problem because
get focused on what you're
you're focused on
is.
things. And, and I will tell you this about being a city council member. And one of the things that I know about being mayor is that when you go to talk to someone, they'll yell at you, or they'll talk to you in a very pointed way, or maybe they'll be friendly, but they're very adamant about something.
Sure.
It usually isn't the issue that they're talking about. The more you talk to people, the more you find out what really makes them tick. And when you find out what makes them tick, you can serve them better. I am a big believer in being open and honest and talking to people. That is something that will change the whole nature of the city, whether it's racial issues or issues about the things that we do with stormwater or with the environment. Always listening, actively listening to what people are really telling you, because that is how you solve problems. It isn't about telling them what you're going to do for them. It's about collaborating with them so that we can solve the issue together. That I think I want people to understand about me. I'm a very collaborative person. I'm very open to ideas and to listening to folks.
So you're saying you are a reflective candidate who's running a people-powered campaign.
That's a good way of putting it. That is a very good way of putting it, Jessica. And the other thing I hope that people know is that, if you want to contact me, you can go to the website, which is mikefortampa.com. You can send me an email at mike@mikefortampa.com. You can call me at 813-489-9415. And I that is my phone, so I'll answer it. And if I don't answer, it's because I'm talking to someone else or I'm doing something else. So please.
So are you running canvases? Do you need volunteers? What other
Absolutely. We have a great. I have to put this on radio. We have a great, volunteer coordinator, as you know, by the name of Erin Wiley, and she is prepared to get you out and walking. We've been walking since summer. And we will continue to walk every weekend as much as possible. We are probably hitting about 500 doors a day.
Wow.
And so if we're out there knocking on your door, please answer it. If you're not there, we're going to leave you a piece of literature. Please read it. And after you read it, if you have any additional questions, please call me or send me an email because I'd love to talk to you.
And what about if people just want to give you cold, sweaty cash donations? What's the best way to donate to your account?
Best way to do it, P.O. Box 173607. And that is zip code 33672, or you can go online at mikefortampa.com, and we have a donate button there. Please be generous. We will accept anything up to $1,000, but if you give me $5 or $10, please do so. One last thing I want to point out, there's something that we're doing special that I think no other campaign has ever done, which is we have individualized street signs. So as an example, you live in New Tampa, as you do, Jessica. We have a Mike for Tampa, but we also have a Mike for New Tampa. We have a Mike for North Bon Air. We have a Mike for Seminole Heights. We have a Mike for Tampa Heights. So we're spreading out to different places so that people can identify their neighborhood and how we are committed to your neighborhood individually. Not just as a sign. It's a sign that individually denotes your own neighborhood. Send me a note if you have a neighborhood that you would like to identify. If you got at least 5 people, we're trying to get a little bit of dollars for that. If you could give us $10 per sign, that'd be great. If not, that's okay too. Just get us a bunch of people in your neighborhood that want it. We'll print them up and we'll send them out throughout the rest of the neighborhood.
Great. It's so hard to get signs from candidates. So I love when people talk about that because people are sign crazy.
I know. They love signs.
They love signs. All right. Well, thank you so much again for driving all the way out here. I appreciate when any candidate comes here and spending time talking about the issues. I really appreciate it. Thank you again to all of our listeners. If you have any questions or comments about the show, you can always reach me at jvaughn30. That's J, V as in Victor, AUGHN as in Nancy, the number 30 at gmail.com. I love to hear all of your feedback. And thank you again, Mike. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. Good luck. I like to tell that to all of the candidates. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. And I got an extra bonus because I got to meet your son and a cute 6-year-old. So.
Oh, and we are hoping that you apply for the Progressive Caucus endorsement, which...
Yes, I got the email and I've got
up to the 28th you have. Hopefully you will apply for that.
I will.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to our podcast and have a great evening.